All right, let's go ahead and call the special meeting to order of the Board of Supervisors, April 3rd, 2020. Go ahead and call the order. Start with a moment of silence. Do you have any dedications from the board? All right, go ahead and dedicate a moment of silence to the folks who have lost their lives in the United States to the COVID-19 virus. I think it's over 6,000 now. Okay. Bruno, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Sure. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
America.
And to the republic for which it stands,
under
one
God,
nation,
indivisible,
under God,
with liberty and
with
justice for
liberty
all.
and justice for all.
Thank you.
Sounds great.
We'll get used to it and get it synced up there. It is a little challenging. Moving right along, our timed item for this event today, or our meeting today on April 3rd, is we have one item, which is 4.1. It is consideration of a resolution authorizing sick leave advance and coverage of employer share of the county health benefit for non-essential employees and cash out of vacation time subject to loss during disasters response and the hazardous duty leave of essential employees to reduce COVID-19 impacts. Go ahead, Carol.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you know, I've been working with a committee, including yourself and Vice Chair Sabatier, our Auditor Controller, Kathy Saderlund, HR Director Pam Samek, and Stephen Carter in the Administrative Office to address the special benefit needs of permanent Lake County employees during the unprecedented COVID-19 disaster. With full understanding that the needs of our employees are really mounting, the committee worked very quickly to review a number of options, and we zeroed in on the ones that we have addressed in the attached resolution for your consideration today. The goals we had in mind to address these gaps were, first of all, to address the gaps in the new federal leave programs. They don't cover every situation. We also wanted to preserve employee health care coverage, especially at a time when employees very well may need it if they get the COVID virus. We also wanted to prevent employees from losing vacation accruals while they're working on the disaster. And finally, provide a benefit to employees who are subject to hazardous duty during the crisis. With that in mind, we are proposing that your board authorize the advance of sick leave up to 80 hours for use during the crisis to be recouped over the 10-month period following the disaster. Originally, we had planned to include a request in an earlier resolution your board approved for sick leave advance, but we pulled that back when we learned that the emergency paid sick leave had been authorized by the federal government. However, the emergency paid sick leave has limitations and will not help all county employees. And in addition to that, the employees who are actively working will not be able to make use of this benefit. Secondly, we're recommending your board continue paying the employer contribution for health care for employees, even if their paid time, the time that they are in paid status in a pay period falls to less than 50%. That would be for the current pay period that we are in now and the next 2 monthly pay periods as well. Ordinarily, if an employee is not on some form of protective leave and their time dips to below 50% of paid status, then the employee is responsible for their health care costs. The employer contribution is not paid. And we know how detrimental that would be during this particular situation when many employees are not able to, due to no fault of their own. Finally, or not finally, actually, next to finally, we have employees who are near their maximum accruals of vacation time, and because of their work in disaster, they may have already been forced to cancel vacations they had planned, or they may simply lose accrued time because they can't take time off over the next few months. And so in this case, we're recommending that such employees be allowed to cash out the amount of the benefit that they would lose during this time. And that would be limited to essential employees, and it would be based on what each employee's maximum accrual level is and how fast they accrue that time. So it would vary somewhat from employee to employee, depending on which labor group they're in and depending on the amount of time the employee has had on the job. Finally, we're recommending that your board authorize 40 hours of hazardous duty leave to essential employees who are not able to shelter in place and who in the course of their work have close personal interaction with the public or are required to carry out duties related to sanitation. What would happen in this case, upon request for employees that meet the criteria for this, is that the time would be what payroll refers to as dropped by payroll, meaning that it would appear on the employee's check stub, and after the disaster, then the employee would be able to use that time for time off, or the time would be maintained on the books through the end of next fiscal year, at which time the employee could cash it out if they haven't used it. And also, if an employee terminated earlier than that, they would cash out whatever was left of it upon termination. So from the view of the committee and myself, I would have to say that this is a starting point for the types of benefits that we think employees need at this time. And if the disaster goes on a long, long time, your board would certainly have the option of doing more. You might want to add to these benefits. There may be additional benefit needs that come up. And for that reason, I would also recommend that we leave the committee in place so that the committee can continue to work with department heads and, based on the needs that are coming up, bring forward additional recommendations or changes to what you have before you today. In particular, for the 40 hours of hazard leave, I think it would be helpful to hear from the two board members who served on the committee about the concept for who is eligible for that leave. And we're actually seeking your board's direction to clarify the eligibility for that. So we're sure it is in sync with the wants of your board. This proposal has been shared with all of our labor groups yesterday. In fact, none of them have given any comment at this point. And this proposal doesn't address extra help employees at all. And we do have a number of extra help employees that are doing hazardous work as well. And with that in mind, I plan to continue the discussion with our department heads that oversee those employees with the possibility of coming back to your board with a proposal to support those employees as well.
Okay, Carol, thank you very much. Bruno, would you like to?
Yeah, no, I think that this came out really well. I'm really proud of item number 2. I think having any employees who are currently getting health care from working over 50% of their time for us, seeing that drop off because they're being forced to stay home and now they're below the 50%, that would hurt. And so I think that's one that I'm really happy that we're looking to offer. When it comes down to the last one, number 4, the hazardous duty, that we were trying to get a definition, and at the time of our conversation, there was not a definition. This definition comes from Carol's conversations with department heads, as well as other heads coming together to try to figure this out. We wanted, if all you're doing is going to work and sitting in an office versus actually having human interaction, because that's what your job requires, we wanted to try to figure out what that definition looked like, because at that point, yeah, you're being put in potential harm's way because People are walking around asymptomatic. We don't know who has the virus or not. And so if we're asking those people to continue working to the benefit of our community, those people deserve to have something in return. Something we didn't talk about, which was the extra help. I think that the number 4, the hazardous duty leave, is kind of after this situation, that they can take advantage of this to get some extra time off, to be relieved from the work that they've done, or potentially being used if they become sick. And I think that we need to look at extra help maybe in hindsight and say, okay, how many hours did you work? What kind of work was done? And what can we look at to offer for those services? Because there is a service being offered to the community from them, especially if they're working for crucial staffing needs, such as special districts, law enforcement, whatever it is that the extra help might be there for. But I think that right now we need to look at who our permanent employees are and what it is that we can do for them. Again, I'd love to continue that conversation at a later time for extra help. I don't think we can, it's so difficult to put so much in one package because, again, this may be only part 1. We're hopeful, as always, that this ends and terminates a lot sooner than we would like it to be, but at the same time, we need to look at it as potentially being a long-term issue that we have to deal with.
Thank you, Supervisor Sabatier. Yeah, I'd like to follow up too on the conversations meeting we had as the committee with Carol and Pam and everybody trying to work through the process. Carol, you hit it right on the head. This is basically, we're trying to fill in the gaps and give the opportunities to let our employees know how much we support them through this process as we're moving through it. It's unprecedented times, and that's why we do have in there that we will be revisited, that we'd like to keep the ad hoc committee together so we can address these issues as this thing unfolds. So appreciate all the hard work, appreciate the opportunity for department heads to see it and be able to give feedback in the future more so we can really, catch anything that we're missing at this point. But ultimately, I want to thank Carol and Pam and everybody else who went through and helped us work on this thing as the committee. And I think this is just one more step of us really letting our employees know that we're trying to do everything we can to support them through these times and to really give them one less thing to worry about, I hope, as they're dealing with this, both in their personal and their professional lives as we're dealing with this COVID-19. So I want to thank everyone for that. So any other board members at this point? Supervisor Brown? You're still on mute.
Yep, I'm working on it. So that's fine. I mean, we're having a conversation now that would traditionally be held in negotiations, in closed session, where we could talk about these things before we come out into open session. And I would request respectfully that if we have much more of this, where we're going to be adding all these things, that we not circumvent that process, so we can have that discussion, that closed session, and come out and take action on that, because it's not. I just think that's part of the process. We could have easily had closed session today and come out, in a half an hour and do that. I just think that, there's a lot of things that we're going to be doing on behalf of our employees, I hope, but I want to be able to express those ideas the proper way so that we don't compromise the county. If we have questions, we don't want to probably express those right now because you don't want to subject the county to some liability or anything. So it's not really a candid conversation that is held for negotiations in closed session. So I'm just asking that we think about that at least.
Okay. Eddie, go ahead. Supervisor Crandall?
Yeah, I'm really glad to see this come forward. Just looking at all of the change or the resolution and the 4 items. And this covers a lot of questions that I had initially when we first started looking at the other resolution that we approved a couple weeks back, just trying to get ahead of everything. And this kind of takes care of it because there's always those unknowns of what happens if I'm working out in the public and others are getting paid the same amount as I am. And here, this gives them some sort of, appreciation. So I thank you guys for putting some of this stuff in and thinking about those different attributes.
Thank you, Supervisor Crandall. All right. Any more? Go ahead, Supervisor Sabatier.
So Supervisor Brown brought up a good point, and I'd like to get Ms. Grant's perspective on this. I know that from my perspective, we were just looking to quickly put something together to offer a level of support that maybe wasn't there before for our staff, and wondering, can we move forward with this is what we want to do versus the typical closed session negotiation where we do have those conversations? And I agree, because you can't be candid if you want to say, I don't think I want to support hazardous pay or hazardous leave, because that doesn't sound good in a public format. And at the same time, those are what closed session spitballing sessions are for, so that we can really argue amongst ourselves and deliberate in a more free environment. So wondering if Ms. Grant can check in on this, just so that next time we make sure to follow the correct path in case that this was not the correct path.
Well, I want to add to that too, if I could, that it's not just about not supporting something, but there may be other things. You know, there's some thoughts that we might have that we could add to this that we could benefit from, that or our employees could benefit from, that aren't a total cost to the county. But I'm not going to bring that stuff up like here. It's just not. It's not appropriate. But the other question I have that I haven't really heard yet is, what exactly is the cost of this, and where is it coming from? But that's a separate question that Anita can't answer, so I want to.
Yep.
No, I can't answer that part. I can say that there's nothing inappropriate in bringing it in this forum. That's not to say that there might not be some appropriate closed session discussions moving forward.
Excellent. But just to clarify again, the ad hoc committee was put together to bring something to us, and we're taking the correct path at this point.
Absolutely.
So, excellent. Thank you.
My point was not that it was incorrect, illegal.
I know, but
there's another way to do it.
Those words were, I think you did use that word about you taking the correct path or something. So.
No, I said that the path would be, if we're going to be talking about negotiations, it should be done in closed session, in my opinion. And the ad hoc committee is not a negotiating team. They bring back recommendations, and they can bring it back in closed session as well, and we can talk about these things. So I'm just asking, if nobody else wants it, I'm only one vote, and that's been abundantly clear many times before this. But I'm still asking that anyway. If it's not something anybody else is interested in, then so be it. But that's what negotiations is typically held for. So I'm expressing that.
Supervisor Sabatier, go ahead. You're off mute already.
Oh, okay. I agree with what Supervisor Brown is asking, and at this moment in time, I would request that we move forward with this specifically, and maybe look at discussing this further on our Tuesday closed session, possibly, to see if there's any other ideas that need to be shared. Again, this is a moving, fluid document where we're going to want to check in to see how this is working for employees, to see if there's anything else that we need to, any other gaps that we're finding. And so I think this needs to be a continuous conversation, but I would like to move forward with this because, again, every day that that goes by, and every day that people see the numbers climbing, we're now at 1 million plus in the world, 6,000 plus in our country. I think that makes our staff nervous to see those numbers keep growing, and by having this moving forward, at least it gives them a level of relief. And I think that relief, again, is going to be something that's going to be a moving target for us as we continue to move forward. So I like the idea of going into a closed session for future asks, so that we can have those conversations. Because, again, we don't want to offer something that gets denied when that offer sounds really good, and now our staff feel bummed that they didn't get it, things like that. So I do appreciate the level of conversation we are allowed to have in closed session. But I think today I would like to move forward with this, and next time maybe add that into the process.
Thank you, Bruno. Tina, go ahead. Supervisor Scott.
I'd just like to thank the committee for the work that they did on this. I also agree that we need to move forward on this, but if the committee were to come back with different recommendations, I do believe Supervisor Brown is correct that maybe we should start with closed session.
Okay. Supervisor Crandall?
Yes, I see kind of both sides of the spectrum here, because I know in some instances, we have to act fast. But then on the other side, sometimes there's entities and especially with the constituents, they're going to think, why are they acting so fast? What are they trying to do? So there's always going to be something. So it makes sense. But either way, I understand we need to act fast, but then we have to make sure we keep those processes in place to make sure that the constituents don't feel like we're just throwing something in there. There's always going to be, that. So if we take those steps, I think we'll be safe.
All right, thank you, Supervisor Crandall. All right, any more comments at this point from the board?
Mr. Chair, would you like to address the cost impacts when you're ready?
Yes, go ahead, Carol.
Okay. So on the sick leave advance, there is zero cost impact. The sick leave will be earned by those employees. Their sick leave balance will be replenished over the subsequent 10 months. If they terminate before the 10 months is up, it will be deducted. The cost of the sick leave will be deducted from their paycheck. For the employer contribution to the health benefit, the cost impact is zero. The cost is budgeted. And if not for the disaster, the benefit would be paid anyway because people's paid time status would not have dipped below 50%. They would be working. For the vacation cash out, the rough estimate for an upfront cost only is approximately $30,000. But the long-term cost is zero because the employees have already earned this benefit and they would either be taking it or it would be paid out to them upon termination. And allowing them to cash it out at this stage may actually have a potential cost savings because if it is held and paid out upon termination, it could be that the employee is earning a higher rate by the time they get to that. So when you terminate, your accrued leave is paid out at the rate you're presently earning, not the rate that you were paid when you earned it. And then finally, the hazard leave. Again, no out-of-pocket costs because if it was not for the disaster, the employees would be working and would be paid for this time anyway. However, there is an impact potentially to lost productivity for the time those employees are away using the leave. And the auditor controller's rough estimate of that was approximately $500,000 in lost productivity, but not out-of-pocket expense.
Carol, thank you very much. As we were going through those process, that was part of the questioning we did as the ad hoc committee. I thought having Bruno on there, who is always a numbers guy looking at these things, is looking at, so we had these conversations. Obviously, I thought it was very well put together as we put this out there. And ultimately, I know admin and our department heads do a great job at all times making sure that they're looking at costs and what may be coming down on behalf of the county for expenses. So I want to thank you very much for doing that. And thank you, Supervisor Brown. Does that answer your questions?
Yes, and it's implied that I don't have confidence in them, but if we have 100% confidence, then we shouldn't even have a board meeting. We'll just have them go ahead and rubber stamp it. I think we still have to honor a process. We've cast aside a lot of our obligation and our responsibility already here. A lot of decisions are being made on our behalf far earlier than we even had a chance to talk about them, and I'm not willing to just give that up at this point.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Brown. Moving along, are there any more comments from the board at this point or input? Go ahead, Supervisor Spotted. Go ahead.
Carol, you just said $500,000. I know during our conversation, and this was for all employees, and granted, not all employees are essential employees as far as needed during an emergency such as this. Is that, because I know that the beginning number we started with was approximately 1 million. Are we thinking that half of the employees are essential employees, therefore it's down to 500?
No, actually, you bring up a good point because it would be less than 500. 500,000, the assumption was that would be the cost for this amount of leave for all employees. And probably 50 to 75% of our employees are actually working as essential workers. So it would be less. That's an absolute worst case scenario for the cost of lost productivity.
And I was fine with the, dealing with the first number. I just wanted to check in and see how we got to that other number, so I appreciate the explanation.
Thank you, Supervisor Sabatier. Okay, we'll go ahead and open this up for public comment. Carol, do we have any comment on this item?
A second, Mr. Chair, let me double check. We did not have any earlier, and it does not appear that any has come in through the.
Jake, do we have any comment on this item?
No, I don't have anybody who has raised their hand for comment.
Okay.
You have some folks in the room, though, Mr. Chair. You may want to ask if anybody in the room which wishes to speak.
So we'll open this up for public comment. Is anybody in the room? Would you like to speak here on this item?
Talking about like the Zoom room.
Okay, seeing none on my screen here. We'll go ahead and bring the item back for action.
I'll offer the resolution.
All right.
Okay, is there a second? Oh, yeah, sorry, it's all roll call, huh? Resolution has been offered.
Okay, Supervisor Simon,
Yes.
Supervisor Sabatier,
Aye.
Supervisor Crandall,
Aye.
Supervisor Brown,
Yep.
and Supervisor Scott.
Aye.
Okay. At this point, then that concludes. Was there two parts to that motion? There was only one, correct?
No, just looks like just one.
Yeah.
Just one, you're fine.
Okay, thank you. Well, that concludes our business for today. Didn't see anything else. So we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting.